Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again this Friday. We are back with another installment of our Reimagining Career Education series. I'm Jamie Sager. I'm the design lead for our Bridging the Gap from Education to Employment project, and Colin Byard, one of our great BG fellows and my partner in crime for our live stream series, is back with us this week as well. Today, we wanted to talk about our college prep lessons from alumni. And we've got two great guests that are joining us. But before we bring them on to have a chat, I wanted to first take a minute to share why this topic is important to us, to share with all of you. Through the work that we've done with our BG project, we've really learned that alumni has to be a critical piece of the career prep puzzle for our students. So Colin, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I was interviewing for my job, I came across the Strata Gallup surveys and the Purdue Gallup Index surveys that are really trying to understand student and alumni perceptions of college. And one of the things that really compelled me and got me excited about this position in particular is kind of the declining confidence that alumni have in the value of a college degree. While a 2016 Purdue Gallup Index study showed that about half of all alumni strongly agree that their education cost was worth it, that number is much lower for recent college graduates, hovering at about 31% who strongly agree, and declining. And so there are some things that we have to be very thoughtful about as we launch students into their alumni status from our institutions, because they're going to be one of the greatest either advocates or detractors from the ability for us to continue enrollment and explain the value of what we provide society. And that leads to point number two, which is I think alumni are both a critical and underutilized element of the college career development ecosystem. Our alums are in positions all over the country, all over the world, in a vast array of industries, doing many different jobs and titles, and have a lot of different responsibilities that can help mentor or identify different career paths to students. You know, what are our psychology major graduates doing out in the real world? And are we able to connect our psychology students to these folks to be able to really help explain what's going on? And so if the alums don't see the value, then they're not going to provide that service back to the institution. And that leads to the third point, which is, you know, we've really done a great job as education at designing this first year experience. We knew there was a problem with student retention. You know, we were losing quite a few students from their first into second year. And so we invested heavily into the first year experience program, you know, and you can see all of the successes that those have had. Well, what about the final year experience or the transition into alumni experience? A lot of our students are having to navigate entering the world, moving to new cities, navigating benefits packages, trying to navigate some of those family dynamics, all kind of without the support that they previously had. A lot of our alums graduate, and as soon as they walk across stage, the amount of resources they have access to drops precipitously. And now all of a sudden they're having to do a very complex life transition without support that they had for the previous 4, 5, or 6 years that they were in school.
Right. And one of our project findings has been that career services doesn't necessarily collaborate all that well with alumni relations, right?
Yeah, and it's just, for me, it's, you know, I look at it as a capacity issue. If you're already struggling to serve the X tens of thousands of students you have on campus, what chance do you really have to serve the hundreds of thousands of alumni that you have? You know, one of the institutions participating in our project has one alumni affairs officer who's in charge of alumni professional development, and that school has just 286,000 alums just on LinkedIn alone. And so how does this person support that student population? How can career services lean in, and how do we provide some of these things at scale becomes a huge challenge. I just don't think that many of our institutions just don't have the capacity to build an effective strategy around this.
Right. It is a major challenge. And there are people out there, thankfully, that are coming up with some creative solutions to help scale this work. And so we're going to bring two of them on right now. So Colin, why don't you introduce our guests for today?
Super excited to have these two gentlemen join me today, both friends as well as kind of professional resources that I rely on in my life. All the way at the far end, we have Daniel Botero. Daniel is the founder of Mastering College to Career. Daniel is an author, established podcaster, has developed an online course related to student career development and does some student mentoring as well and has a program for that. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me and having this conversation with me on Facebook or even LinkedIn Live.
Absolutely. Anytime. Always enjoy our conversations. And in the middle here, we have Justin. Justin is the founder of Get Yo Grind Up. Also, quite an established podcast host himself, runs a couple of different podcasts that really help students navigate college, unlock the cheat codes, as he likes to say, to navigating the college experience and landing a job on the other side. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm surviving. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with Daniel, and then we're going to move to Justin on this one. But both of you had quite a few different professional avenues. Daniel, I know you were established working at Pepsi. Justin, I know you had quite a few job offers and opportunities on the table when you were leaving college. And both of you kind of left those opportunities behind to start and found your own organizations designed around helping college students predominantly transfer into the world of work. Talk to me a little bit about your organizations and why you chose to found these organizations.
So for me, I realized, so I graduated in 2012 from the University of Central Florida, and first generation minority student, I thought going to school in America meant you graduate guaranteed to have a job lined up. And luckily I did that. I fulfilled that prophecy. But when I look back, I realized that a lot of my friends and family, or the people I grew up with in high school that graduated college after me, weren't that lucky to graduate with a job. And so, like you mentioned, I worked for PepsiCo. I was coming back on campus representing PepsiCo at career services, the info sessions. And I realized how many students were coming to me to the PepsiCo table and had no clue what they wanted to do and just really lacked this clarity about what they wanted to do after and where they wanted to do. And that really led to me figuring out that students needed help. And I realized that the first job out of college really set the foundation for the rest of their professional career. And so, long story short, after doing a lot of public speaking and doing campus recruitment for PepsiCo, I found that I wanted to create a company to help first generation minority students graduate college with a job and a career that really set them for success for the rest of their professional career.
Definitely. And Justin, what about you? What led you to found Get Yo Grind Up?
Yeah, so to kind of understand the story of how I started Get Your Grind Up, I kind of have to take it back to like how my parents came over to the United States. So they're both Vietnamese refugees, and they came over here after the Vietnam War when they were very young. And during their upbringing, school was like the number one thing. So it was like you go to school, get a good job, get a good grades, get a good job. And they kind of passed that down to me as well. And essentially everyone else that I grew up around, like the parents of my friends, etc., and schooling, they would say the same exact thing. So school, like college, was never really a place for education, so to say. It was more of a place that, okay, I need to do this to get a job. And I think that is what a lot of students' perceptions are about university, especially the ones that are younger than me, because I'm kind of like that first year of Gen Z, so to say. But during my schooling, I did what I was supposed to do, what everyone told me to do. I had the near 4.0 GPA my sophomore year. I joined the clubs, etc. And I was like, okay, it's time to find an internship. And I tried to find internships. I applied to like 50 of them, and I didn't even get a call back. I just got flat out rejected. And I was like, what the heck is going on right now? That's when I started to figure out these cheat codes, these secrets. And all of my friends were like, they would joke around with me just saying like, you're just getting good grades because you're Asian, or you're just getting these internships because you're Asian. And I'm like, haha, I get that. Like Asian stereotypes are just naturally smart. That's cool. But let me show you all the work that I'm actually putting in and how I'm getting these internships at Fortune 150 companies, etc. So started to put on my Snapchat, my Instagram, and it started to gain some momentum, again, as a joke. And then my girlfriend and one of my best friends from back home were like, let's turn this into something serious. And that's when Get Your Grind Up started. Essentially, we started off with a podcast, the first one, the Get Your Grind Up podcast. And now we're moving on to the Declassified College podcast. And it's been absolutely insane to see what the response has been, especially the latest podcast with Declassified College. And essentially what we do is we create a lot of content online, and we're looking to, like you said earlier, share the cheat codes to success for college students.
Definitely. So, both of you, there's some similar elements to your stories I think are really important to highlight. Kind of this, you go to college to get a job, and that a lot of students, are working under that premise. Something that I continuously go to the both of you on is, this on the ground intel of like, what are our students saying? What are our alumni saying? Where are they at? What's going on? And especially right now, I think it's more important than ever for us to really understand and listen to those perspectives. And so what are some of the things that you all are hearing from either students who just graduated, young alumni, or students who have been impacted from a professional stance on COVID-19? What are some of those themes and things that you both are hearing?
Sure. I mean, I can go first. What's funny is that in the last couple of months, students are now being more concerned about what their future looks like. They hear all these companies doing layoffs, that the unemployment is going to be at all-time high. And what I find is that they should have been the same level of concern even before COVID-19. But at least now this COVID-19 is bringing awareness, and they're taking their career more seriously. So what I find now is that they're concerned, and they feel like that they're at disadvantage in finding companies. I think students don't understand, why would a company hire someone that recently just graduated out of college versus somebody who might have 5 to 10 years of experience, who might have just been laid off and could be applying for companies which they're overqualified. And so helping them understand that, it's really important. And the second thing, I think students never actually have taken the time to realize what it is that they truly want and what they want in the company. And what I've seen students do so much is that they just apply for every company which they meet the minimum qualifications for, versus actually saying, all right, let me stop. Let me figure out 5 to 10 companies where I really see myself, that I really align to, and let me position myself as the ideal candidate. And that's not happening, right? Instead, they apply to hundreds of jobs, and they wonder why they never hear back. And I think that's the problem, because I don't think that they are learning that companies, when they're hiring, they're actually hiring to solve a problem. And so you cannot be the solution to every problem. So until you take the time to do some self-assessments and realize what is it that you want to do, and what problem can you solve, and what solutions can you bring to the table, it's going to be very difficult for them to get noticed and to get a job. And the key really comes down to like visibility. It's even more important than ability. And they feel like they have the ability, but they're missing the visibility part.
It sounds like from your perspective, then students are becoming even more discouraged because of the increasing amount of rejection that they may be facing due to poor strategizing on their end about how to approach the job search.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Justin, what do you think? What are some of the things that you're hearing from students that you interact with?
I mean, I think a lot of it echoes exactly what Daniel was talking about. I think a lot of students are very concerned on like where their career is going to actually go because of all of the layoffs and furloughs that are happening. But I think another thing that's really unique to the specific scenario that a lot of students are in, especially in sort of the Central Florida area, is like students are asking, how do I pivot if my industry is gone? You know what I mean? All of these students that are graduating with hospitality degrees, they have specific skills that can be utilized in other industries, but they're not necessarily taught that in school. And they're coming out with the question of like, oh, okay, I have this hospitality degree, but Disney's not hiring, Universal's not hiring, the cruise lines definitely aren't hiring. Like, how do I get a job? And I think that's where there's a unique place for a lot of people like myself, like Daniel, like you as well, of like educating students on not necessarily the degree that they have, but more on the skills that they have and how they can utilize that to find their dream job now that if their industry is just gone.
Do either of you have like a specific story of someone you've talked to that really exemplifies that happening in real time?
Like having to shift or pivot. Like here's an example. I had a student that I work with. Her name is Claudia. And when I first talked to her, she's one of the type of students that she's had to work for her family business throughout her whole college career. And her mom owned a small accounting firm, small accounting firm. And she lacked the confidence to think that she would not be qualified to go into a management training program because all she's done is work for her mom, and she hasn't had the opportunity to get involved in student organizations because her mom needs her to work 40 to 50 hours at her business to help pay the bills, right? And so that is an example of someone that she might think, hey, I only have accounting experience, I only have bookkeeping experience, but she forgets the fact that there's a level of grit that you have by working 40, 50 hours a week and being a full-time student. There's a level of grit of managing bookkeeping accounts and managing different personalities and different business owners, that once she realized that she actually has a lot of transferable skills and a lot to bring to the table, and that there's a lot of companies out there that see 6 years of straight work experience as a huge benefit, that led her to communicate better and led her to an internship with PepsiCo, which has nothing to do with accounting, which is what she did.
Right. Justin, what about you? Do you have any students that you've talked to recently that you think embody this idea of trying to pivot?
I think I don't necessarily have like a success story like Daniel's, but I have a lot of friends that just graduated with a hospitality degree, and they don't know what they're doing. So like I'm in the process of like trying to show them like, hey, you actually have business skills. Essentially, you can go and apply this to essentially any company around the United States if you understand how to tell your story in the right way. So like I know 3 people off the top of my head of like a friend Dylan, Brenna, and Becca, where they just graduated or they're about to graduate in hospitality. And Disney, like one had a job at Disney, which they're not even doing anymore because Disney hotels aren't open. And then one was really planning on going into the cruise line industry. And that's been completely shut down into maybe August of this year, but probably they won't be hiring for a long time. So those are 3 examples of 3 students that I know off the top of my head that are in the exact situation where they need to understand that mindset. And I think that's a unique place where higher education institutions can play, of saying like, hey, you just graduated with this, like, here's some help that you can, we can offer to our alumni. Here's some industries that you might have the skills to like transition to. I think that'd be a great help for a lot of students.
Colin, can I add something to this?
Yeah, of course.
I think, one of the most common jobs that students have while working is being a server, right? Being a server and working in retail. And I talk to a lot of students who are servers who work their way through college as serving and then go to school, and they don't have the ability to do internships. And I'm actually even thinking of a student right now who worked at a bartender at a club for 4 years, right? And again, if we think about the server role, which is the most common role that a student has while they're in college, there's so many great things that they're transferable, right? You can go into sales, you can go to customer service, you can go into hospitality, which it is service. But think about how you can, the way that you point it, the way that you position that in your resume, right? All these restaurants nowadays have smart POS systems that track every metric from the point of what percentage of your customers actually buy dessert or alcohol. What percentage, do you get 22% tip? The average check gives you a 22% tip, and the rest of the restaurant gets 18%. Those are all metrics that you can show that you were above average. Right. That 50% of your customers buy dessert, and the restaurant average is 15. Like, those are all ways to show that you can sell, that you have customer service, that you have all these transferable skills that any company dies for. And if you can talk about that, that is the key. How you talk about it and you position it, that's how you get a leg up and you can pivot.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece, and the creativity and or guidance, right? So both of you, the real secret to both of your kind of organizations is that mentoring and helping those students develop that, which to me feels like something that we need to do a better job in higher education of integrating into our work to help students identify those opportunities, to help students look for other industries and help students understand what skills they can bring. And so for our final question to both of you, we're going to start with Justin this time and then move to Daniel. If I could give you the keys to an institution, if that were a thing, like a key to a car, and you're now in charge for one day, what's the first thing that you would change to better help students that you talk to?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go really radical with this one. I think the first thing that I'm going to change is like the curriculum as a whole. So I would scrap gen eds essentially. And instead of students choosing one major when they're coming in or they're choosing undecided, what I would say is you get to choose 4 industries that you're interested in. So let's say you're interested in sports medicine, engineering, finance, and psychology. And that first 2 years that you're in college, every semester you'd be in a full-time internship in one of those industries. So it's kind of on like a rotational track. So very similar to like a management trainee program or anything like that where you're rotated. That way, at least the student can understand what they're getting themselves into and if they like it. Because I've heard horror stories of like students wanting to become a physical therapist and they're in their 4th or 5th year of school. And then they get to the actual like hands-on portion and they're like, oh, I don't actually get to deal with athletes. Or if I want to deal with athletes, I need to get a doctorate's program. That's not me. And then they've just wasted 4 or 5 years of schooling. And I think this alleviates that. And when you would graduate from that 2-year internship, so to say, you would then choose the specific industry that you want to go into as your major. And then from there, those last 2 years, it allows schools to be more flexible with what they teach, because with technology changing so quickly, a 4-year degree can get quickly outdated. Whereas a 2-year degree, you have a little bit more flexibility of like changing it depending on if a new technology has risen or anything like that. So I think that's the biggest change that I would make if I took over school today.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you really hear from students and see from students that you work with this incredible need for more realistic kind of career exploration to really help students understand kind of the real world picture of what's going on. So yeah, you're definitely radical. That's burn it to the ground and start over from scratch. And so you're going in big and making lots of enemies through your process.
I think students are exactly doing that. We've had this conversation too, where I think a lot of students, they just don't understand what they want to do when they graduate. So those first 2 years out of college, like millennials and Gen Zs get bad reputations of always switching companies and roles because they're essentially taking that as like their internship semesters, right? Because they're going out there and this is like maybe the first time that they're getting real life work experience. I think if you put that at the front end so that they're able to hyper focus in the back end of their learning, you'll have a lot higher results of like employment retention rates for companies looking to hire, as well as employment rates of graduates too.
Awesome, thanks. And Daniel, what about you? If you had the keys for one day, what are you doing?
I think I'm with Justin. Let's burn this. No, just kidding. I think for me, I think what I would change is the first year and the last year. I think those are the two keys. I think the first year I really would focus on self-assessment, right? I think that the university, at least from what I can see, it's like a one size fits all. There's not a lot of customization. And here's the reality. Like one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein is, "We shouldn't measure a fish by his ability to climb a tree," right? And we should measure his ability by the way he swims, right? And so what I would want is to have more self-assessments that could test the students' natural abilities and what they're good at, and then help them find a track. Like if I am more hands-on driven, then I should go into a more technical, into a more hands-on field. If I am more research driven, then have my classes and the way that I learn be more through textbook versus hands-on experience. So customizing the way you learn, customizing your university experience by that. The second thing is, I think everybody should learn how to network. It doesn't matter your major, it doesn't matter what university you go to. Understanding there should be a mandatory networking class for all students. And not even networking as how to meet someone at an event, but how to create win-win situations and how to make sure that it's mutual beneficial and you're adding value to this, because we hear this all the time. Your network is your net worth. But why are we not teaching that? And the third one, which doesn't have to do a lot about what we're talking about now, but it's personal finances. If we can teach students personal finances and what are we getting for our investments, that might change people's, that might not, you get a lot of less people to not go to college or even change their majors, and then realizing that a lot of companies don't really care what your major is. They just want you to make sure that you graduated.
Definitely. Well, gents, this brings us to time, but thank you so much for your insights. Always appreciate hearing from the both of you and your willingness to share your background stories and a little bit about the work that you do. If you ever want to get in touch with Daniel or Justin, look them up on LinkedIn. You will find them very quickly, I promise.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
you both. We look forward to learning a lot more from you in the future. Thanks so much. And bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back again next week.